This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Today we start new Gambit series. Belgrade Gambit. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So for reaching the standard position of the Scotch, we usually play d4. However, if you like to reach the Belgrade Gambit, you have to start with knight c3. And only after knight f6 to move your pawn forward after d4. So after e takes d4, we have more or less two options. So one is the most playable, is knight takes d4 already. The theory of this line was developed more than 100 years ago, and still no much news on this direction after the black's best reaction, which is bishop b4, after which white is just only getting slightly better position in case of knight takes c6, b takes c6 and bishop d3. However, just after the Second World War, the Yugoslavian chess players were looking at this position and discovered quite interesting opportunity for white to play knight from c3 to d5, which we call today the Belgrade Gambit. So after knight d5, white is just ready to sacrifice the material in order to get very dynamic position thanks to the strong knight on d5. So the move like knight takes e4 we will examine later on, but before I would like to show you a few interesting opportunities. So how not easy to play in this position for black, even just after 5 moves. So the reaction of black in order to stop bishop g5 idea, so to stop the pin and to play a move like h6, just cannot be recommended. The point is that black is just losing the time, and white immediately could play in such a position. Bishop f4 after d6, knight takes d4, and the position is quite dangerous for black, because in case of knight takes e4, white has quite unpleasant move knight b5, threatening the c7 pawn. If in this position after knight takes d4 black is trying to play knight e5, aiming to send away white's knight or to exchange this knight after c7, c6, this would lead to the great troubles. After bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and now white is just continued developing his pieces by bishop b5 check. So strangely enough, black is in big trouble already here. Let's understand what's the problem. First of all, hardly even we can play c6, because it leads to the immediate knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6 check, aiming the rook on a8, bishop d7, and after bishop takes a8, black is losing the material, since queen takes a8 could be met by simple fork knight c7 check. So in order to complete all those lines, we can understand that same knight d7 also would lead to the material lose after bishop takes a8. So it's quite clear that black just cannot accept the sacrifice on c6. It means that after bishop b5 check is necessary to play or bishop d7 or knight d7. So first of all, after bishop d7, black is getting into a very unpleasant situation. After bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, knight takes on f6, g takes f6, and next move is knight f5. So despite the fact that material is still even, black's position is very, very difficult. White is having just knight on f5 forever, which is definitely much stronger than black's bishop on f8. So for black is just also in the middle game and also in the game, in the end game, just quite difficult to find any serious counterplay because his king side is so exposed. So in that case you can ask me, so why not to play just simply knight d7? Just locking all the opportunity from white side, looks like. However, in that case, white has just very nice and very unusual shot which just immediately finishes the game. Can you find it? White to move and win. Knight to e6 sends to the bad position of the king in the center and weakness of the diagonal e8 h5. Black has to accept the sacrifice, since after queen moving to h4 we just simply play knight takes c7 and winning at least the rook on a8, and after f takes e6 white is coming with a checkmate by queen h5 check, g6 and queen takes g6. So fast the game could be finished in the Belgrade gambit after just only a few very inaccurate moves. So it becomes clear that with moves like h6 wasting the time, black just cannot play in the Belgrade gambit and he has to look for the better alternatives. Let's look once again the starting point. e4 e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, d4, e takes d4, knight d5. So, as we saw before, h6 is quite dangerous. The idea to develop the bishop to the long diagonal after g6 is also cannot be recommended. White simply gets very promising position after bishop g5, pinning the knight. Bishop g7 and after knight takes d4. White is keeping quite serious pressure in the center. Castling short side, and here even knight b5 is quite unpleasant. So for black it's very difficult to protect the pawn on c7. So we'll look at this position that h6 and g6 cannot be recommended. So black can try in such a situation immediately to exchange the white's knight on d5 after knight takes d5, e takes d5, and try to play for material advantage. Try to win the pawn on d5 later on by bishop b4 check, bishop d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2. So all line is forced. Queen e7 check, bishop e2, and now knight b4. Knight takes d4, and black decided to capture the pawn on d5 because otherwise white just simply intends to move his pawn to c4, taking more control over the center, and It's absolutely unclear what for black moved his knight to b4 if not to capture the pawn on d5. So knight takes d5. However, in such a position, after short castling, we can realize that it's not so easy to find the good response for black. What's the point? The point is that if you play d6, white simply plays bishop b5 check, and next move would be rook e1. Clear that c6 cannot be recommended because of similar tactics with knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6, and white at least win in exchange, threatening also rook e1. So just winning position. And the second alternative for black here is just to castle immediately. In that case, white has knight f5, queen e5, and it's not so clear how to continue your attack, since queen g5 is not so strong, at least after queen g6. However, white is having here nice combination attack, which start with the sacrifice. Queen takes d5. So suddenly black cannot recapture the queen, since after queen takes d5, white is coming with this nice fork, knight e7, and just wins a piece with no any compensation. Queen takes e2. So at least black had the opportunity to capture white's bishop. However, the very powerful position of white's knight and the queen in the center and undeveloped black pieces just given a good reason for white to play for attack. So the strong alternative in this position is rook f to e1. Some games I saw in this position just finished with the knight take g7. However, it's quite difficult to pretend here on more than a draw after king take g7. Queen g5 check. King h8. So white has queen f6 with the repetition of the moves. However, I don't see if white has any more opportunities to play for win here in this position. Rook e1 improves dramatically white's attack. So in such a situation, it's very difficult for black to find a good move. Let's understand why. For instance, after queen g4, black is losing immediately. Simply h3. Queen somewhere g5 or h5, it doesn't matter. And then knight e7. The queen is hanging. The game is finished. After rook f to e1 to capture another pawn, queen takes c2. So what would happen in that case? Let's try to find. So this is a typical situation when white is having just one extra piece in the game. I mean, knight on f5 is much more active than the bishop on c8, and all black pieces still on the back rank. Despite the fact the king is already castled, white can create the decisive threats against it. So let's try to find the way how white could complete his task. Queen e5. Threatening the mate with queen take g7. It's not leaving black too many defensive resources, but f6. In that case, we come back with the check. And after king h8, just performing another combination for the weakness of the back rank. So if you solve the puzzle, that you can find the solution quite easily. White to move and win. Queen f7 sends to the tactical nuance, black cannot accept the queen sacrifice. Queen just cannot be captured. After rook takes f7, white is winning immediately with rook e8, and this is a check and mate. And the only move in such a position is rook g8, after which white is just winning by force after rook e8. So the game is over. Just rook cannot be captured because of the checkmate, but from the other side there is no way to stop queen takes or rook take g8 or queen take g7, and this is also checkmate. So black is just done. Look at the typical situation. White, thanks to his development advantage, just demolishing black's position so fast already in the opening. Let's try to find the better defenses for black after knight d5. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3 and knight f6, d4, e takes d4, and now knight d5. So we look on knight takes d5, we look at g6, we look at h6. Now let's try to develop bishop to e7, and only after white capture it back with knight takes d4, maybe to capture on e4 the pawn. I would say that better solution probably in this position is just to play short castling, but let's understand why knight takes e4 is so dangerous. The reason is just even here, tactical. After knight f5, black is having a lot of troubles, since all his pieces and pawns are hanging. So there is no time for black to castle short side. Since after queen g4, the position is just very, very difficult for black. White is intending queen takes e4, white is intending queen take g7. Move g6 is just losing instantly after knight takes e7. Knight takes e7. And thanks to the lot of problems over the long diagonal, so white just simply takes the advantage of it by tricky move, queen d4. Simultaneously attacks the knight on e4 and the rook on h8. So the game is over. All black is losing a piece after castling, and then queen takes e4 with the extra piece with no any compensation for black. Or black has to play knight takes d5. However, queen takes h8, king e7, and then queen e5 leads to the forced checkmate. Black's only move is king f8. Now we are not capturing even knights, we just simply bring the bishop into the game, and this is forcing black to resign, since king g8 will be met by queen g7, and this is a checkmate. So as you can see, black is in quite serious trouble in case we don't know how to react on Belgrade gambit. So finally, let's try to look at the position after knight takes e4 immediate. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, d4, e takes d4, knight d5. So the quite principal move in such position is knight takes e4. So now white has to prove that his compensation is real. So the most natural continuation, of course, is just trying to use the position of knight on e4, which is hanging and also pinned in many lines after queen e2. Black cannot move his queen to e7 since e7 square is controlled by white's knight. However, f5. And now white has two interesting opportunities. So the old theoretical move here, I would show you, is knight g5, which leads to enormous complications. So white is intending also to capture on e4. Also in many lines, white is intending queen h5 move. So the strong position of knight on d5 is not allowing black to develop so easily, and move like knight e7, trying to exchange the strong knight on d5, leads to the huge problems for black by knight takes e4. One game even finished with the classical checkmate, like from the game Keres-Arlamovsky, from the famous Caro-Kann trap, when knight takes d5 could be met here with knight d6. This is a double check and this is a checkmate. So instead of knight e7, if in such a position black is playing bishop e7, this also leads to the quite serious problem. Knight takes e4, f takes e4, queen takes e4 is very difficult for black to continue developing. Short castling, bishop to d3, g6. So now white could continue bishop to h6, intending just simply short castling next move. Bishop b4 check. Black is trying to use position of white's queen and the king, which both are situated on the e file. However, this attempt is not successful after king f1, and now in case of rook e8, white already could make black's life very difficult after queen knight f6 check, and the position of black is just completely lost. Queen takes f6, queen takes here check, bishop f8, and at least we are going to win another piece after bishop c4 check. d5, bishop takes d5. It's quite funny that this position was played in the game between two strong pairs, one Wonderwady and Ye Rongguan, in the Harlem Open Tournament 1996. And Ye just didn't find any good solution in this position and lost almost immediately still after knight e7. Knight takes e4, f takes e4, and here Wonderwady came with check on h5, g6, queen e5, threatening rook on h8, rook g8. It was possible already to play knight f6, but white simply continued developing his pieces. Bishop g5, black is still in big trouble. Bishop g7, and suddenly after knight takes c7 check, king f7. So instead of moving the bishop to c4, white simply checked black's queen after queen f4, and the game immediately finished after 13 moves. So black just completely hopeless. Cannot move bishop to f6 because queen takes f6, and cannot move knight f5 because bishop takes d8. So let's back a few moves and look once again the position after knight takes e4, knight g5, and try to find some better solution for black. So instead of knight e7, once black tried to play in this position bishop b4 check. So trying to finish the development by this check and later on maybe to go for short castling. However, white is using here the Danish gambit ideas. c3, d takes c3, b takes c3. So black has to move his bishop, and once again white is intending to capture on e4, and then queen h5 or queen takes e4 with a serious initiative, because black's king is still in the center. So black went for complication, played knight d4, starting his own counterattack. Queen h5 check, g6, queen h4, threatening finally to capture the knight to b4, the bishop. So black is going for material, knight c2 check, king d1, knight takes a1, but white's attack becomes just very strong. Bishop c4, going once again for development instead of material. Bishop e7, black is trying somehow survive this attack, but white just moving the last piece in the attack, rook to e1. So all white forces almost takes part in the actions against the black's king. c6. So now white came with the queen sacrifice, knight takes e4. So all is happening in the game between Cornley and Carlos Koni in the Budapest Open Tournament in 1986. After bishop takes h4, knight d6 check, king f8, bishop h6 check, king g8, and finally knight f6, and this is a checkmate. So same situation would happen after knight e7, because this is also the checkmate. So enormous complication happened after knight takes e4, but I will show you that the situation even there is not so simple. So just in our first lesson, we were studying interesting ideas and which happen in the Belgrade gambit. So white is trying to use dynamic activity of all his pieces, especially the knight on d5, and trying to attack the black's king, which is still in the center, and that for this reason white is ready even to sacrifice his center pawn on e4. So you can see that it's not so clear how to react for black in this complicated situation of the Belgrade gambit. So that's why Belgrade gambit became quite popular, let's say maybe 30-40 years ago. It was just played even on the serious level, and I found just many games which Belgrade gambit used to play even by strong masters and even grandmasters. Even today, I found a few games played by grandmaster. So this interesting opening line we are going to continue studying the next week. So I would like just to explain more about today's theory. So how today we are going to fight against the great white's ideas. If you have any question regarding the Belgrade gambit or about the gambit guide, the general course about how to play aggressively and in the opening and how to surprise the opponent, so you can leave me a message on ICC. See you next week.